Hey everybody, it's Rockula, and welcome back to Rockula Retrospective. This is another installment of the Zappaphile, and it will be about documentaries. This time we're going to cover the Frank Zappa documentary from the BBC in 1993.
I'd like to thank the people at the BBC for giving us a chance to do some of the things on television here that they would never let us do in the United States.
Now, if you're a regular viewer, you know that my first episode of the Zappaphile was called the Zappa Starter Kit, and you can see that here. And I covered all of the essential albums that the beginning Zappa fan could get into. Now, what I'm going to do is give you a documentary that is the Zappa Starter Kit of documentaries for a couple of reasons. One, there's a million documentaries out there on Frank Zappa, and some of them are tremendously long and go into minute little details. But this one was made by the BBC, first of all, and the BBC makes the best documentaries. Second of all, it's only an hour long, so there's not a real overload of minute details. They managed to cover pretty much everything. And lastly, it was shot right around the time of Zappa's death, so it has some of his last interviews, and it shows Zappa's musical evolution at the end of his life. So let's check out this documentary. I'm going to do this real quick. I'm not going to do any documentary spoilers. What I'm going to do is just give you a couple of bullet points why you should want to watch this documentary and give you little snippets of what I'm talking about. So first of all, one of the amusing things is, since it is a BBC documentary, the Brits and their pronunciation of Frank Zappa's name.
The American musician Frank Zappa. Zappa is Zappa. Frank Zappa is Zappa is what? Zappa is Frank Zappa is the Frank Vincent Zappa.
So I find that really hilarious. But this documentary, like I said, it's got everything. It's got the origin story of how Zappa grew up in Lancaster and listened to Johnny Guitar Watson on the jukebox at the chili joint. And Johnny Guitar Watson ended up being one of his biggest guitar influences.
This couple that owned the chili place, Opal and Chester, agreed to ask the man who serviced the jukebox to put in some of the song titles that I liked, because I promised that I would dutifully keep pumping quarters into this thing so I could listen to him. And so I had the ability to eat good chili and listen to 3 Hours Past Midnight by Johnny Guitar Watson.
Next, they cover his discovery of the avant-garde classical composers like Stravinsky and Edgard Varese.
I don't know how I finally got introduced to it. I guess it was because of that Varese album that I read about in a magazine. It just sounded good to me. It's the dissonance, the way I perceived the dissonance was, these chords are really mean. I like these chords.
Then we have the origin story of the Mothers of Invention, and they also explain the problems with the name The Mothers.
The Mothers is a bad name for a group, and that no radio station would ever play our records because at the time it was, if you were a good musician, you were a motherfucker. And Mothers was short for collection of motherfuckers.
Zappa puts out about 7 albums with the Mothers, breaks them up, and then reforms them again as kind of a comedy group with Flo and Eddie. But not before putting out one of the most important albums of his career, Hot Rats.
Zappa surprised his large following with the relatively smooth style of Hot Rats, the first album released under his own name. It was mostly instrumental, featuring extended sax, violin and guitar solos, which were melodically accessible as well as musically sophisticated. Hot Rats was completely free of the Dada disruptiveness that had characterized the Mothers albums. Then, just when a solo career looked likely, Zappa reformed the Mothers, but with a different lineup. The old surrealism was played down in favour of increasingly bawdy slapstick humour.
After that, Zappa seems to find some equilibrium when he solidifies all of his different aspects of his musical side and satirical side all into one. And this has one of the best quotes of any Zappa quote that I've ever heard about sex.
Well, have you ever looked at people fucking? Ouch. I mean, that's a silly looking thing to begin with. It's silly looking. Let's face it, it looks silly. Why not say so? I mean, so what if it feels good? It's still silly.
Of course, we have the young version of Dweezil and Ahmet commenting about how discerning their father's ear was.
It's so cool.
It should be illegal to
at rehearsals or something, he'll be playing, and all of a sudden you'll see his face go, you know, and he's like, oh, God, like someone will like make a mistake, and he's like, you know, and like it hits him, like the wrong note hits him, and like, do it again, you know, he's playing, and like it's so loud, and you're going, how the hell can he hear anything?
The music that the band is trying to play is so complicated, and to hear the one wrong note out of everything that's going on stage and not, you know, I mean, sometimes you don't have certain instruments up as loud as others, but he always catches that stuff.
He's
and
insane.
It's frightening. He's got the magic ears.
After tiring of playing on the road and touring, Zappa branches out and explores international business and trade relations, only to have his efforts undermined by the US government.
Zappa finally stopped playing live in 1988. Tiring of life on the road and his band squabbling, he turned to business and politics. He set up his own company to trade with Eastern Europe, and a visit to post-revolutionary Prague in 1991 led to an unexpected alliance with the Czech government.
And the next thing I know, Quail doesn't come. Instead, what's his name? James Baker III reroutes his trip to Moscow so that he can come blasting into Prague and literally lays down the law to the Czech government. It says you can either do business with the United States or you can do business with Zappa. What'll it be?
The documentary then comes around full circle to what is then his current work in the early 90s, involving a very important piece of sampling equipment called the synclavier.
Just because you're not working with musicians doesn't mean you're not working. And there's certainly a lot of things that have to be done in a very methodical way with the devices that I use. And it's not that I don't interact with people, because I do have a staff here that helps me do all this stuff. I'm much happier working with my highly skilled technical team here at the Utility Muffin Research Kitchen. I really enjoy working with them.
Well, that's it for the Zappaphile documentary starter kit. Let me know what you think about it in the comments below, and of course I'd like for you to like and subscribe. I'm going to be doing a lot more documentaries in this big, huge universe that is Frank Zappa, so look for more documentaries in the future. I'm Rockula, and this is Rockula Retrospective. Let's do this again, shall we? Holy shit, that's still on?